Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this evening's information session / alumni panel for the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. My name is Rachel Skipper. I will be leading today's session as I work in admissions for the Maxwell School. So I'm a good person to talk to when you have questions about the admissions process. I would like to allow our panelists to introduce themselves to you. So we will, I guess, go in the order on this slide. Anil, would you like to get started?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Anil Gupta. I graduated from Maxwell in 2019 with a degree in international relations and the two minors you see on screen, global security studies and political science. And I'm originally from Northern Virginia, and I live here now working in DC, and I'm also in grad school. I started grad school like a year and a half ago. I finished up in May. And in the years since then, in between then, I've been working in the defense industry and defense consulting, and I'm currently at the State Department right now. So happy to answer any questions in the chat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amber. I graduated from Syracuse in 2020. My majors, I guess you can see, are on the screen: political science and communication and rhetorical studies, which we can get into later maybe, but that's actually in BPA. So if anyone has questions about double majoring across schools, I can talk about that. And I'm currently a first-year law student, so I'm living in DC as well, doing that.
Hi, I'm Olekisy. I'm Ukrainian. You can call me Alex. I graduated from Maxwell in 2017. Currently, I live and work in New York in consulting, pharmaceutical consulting. I got degrees in public administration and international relations. I spent 3 years in Washington, D.C. working for World Bank Group. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. So students, just so you know how we're going to proceed, as you have questions during these slides that we're going to present for you and during these conversations, please just use the chat, let us know what they are. So first, I want to chat with you briefly about the majors that will be available to you at Syracuse and specifically in the Maxwell School. You've heard what majors our panelists pursued and also about Alex's graduate degrees at Syracuse, which were also obviously in the Maxwell School. So as undergraduate students, the orange or underlined majors on your screen are what we're going to be talking about for Maxwell majors. But just for your clarification, this is a question we get frequently, what about other majors around the university, right? Amber already mentioned she had a major in BPA. We also have a long list of arts and sciences majors here. And the first step for most students when they pair different majors together is to pair multiple Maxwell majors together, or Maxwell majors go with arts and sciences majors. Those are easy pairings. You fill out a form, you're good to go. So really everything on this screen is an option for you, and you should view this list as a starting point. You'll likely change your mind as you go through your 4 years. I'm sure our panelists did, and we'll talk about that a little bit in just a few minutes. We do see students pairing different programs together over half of the time. So again, even though you might be kind of pigeonholing yourself now, oh, I know I want to do political science, that's what I want to do. Again, I encourage you to keep those boundaries a little bit loose, keep your expectations a little bit open, because it's very likely that while you're at Syracuse, you're going to start learning about other things, pursuing different programs and thinking about new things that you didn't have any chance to learn about yet as a high school student, or that you didn't realize might be interesting to you. So on that note, do our panelists want to talk at all about how you landed on the multiple programs that each one of you actually ended up pursuing? We don't even have a single panelist that only did one major here, which is classic Syracuse. So does anyone want to chime in on that, on how that process was for them? Go ahead, Amber, I see you.
Okay, I can start, sure. Okay, so I entered Syracuse undecided. So to those who I saw in the chat saying that they were undecided, that's totally okay, because I know sometimes that can be daunting or feel daunting to feel like you don't know. But I decided on political science, honestly, because I had interest in government, and I just felt as though political science was a good way for me to learn more about that. And I also kind of knew that I wanted to go to law school, and I had heard that like a lot of people who go to law school major in political science. I feel like that influenced me slightly, although I will preface for anyone considering law school, you can major in literally anything you want. But that's how I landed in political science. And then the second major came much later in my Syracuse kind of career, but it's really nice because Syracuse allows you that flexibility. So
Yeah, I can touch on it briefly. I guess for me, I kind of knew I definitely wanted like the international aspect of like political science. So that's kind of where I settled on like the middle ground, like with international relations, because it covers you take a lot of political science classes, but you also take like some regional classes depending what region you're interested in for the most part. And maybe if it matches like a language skill you might have. So I kind of just integrated that, and with like always just being fascinated by like foreign policy and national security. So I kind of just combined and merged like all these like specialty areas into just my Maxwell degrees.
Absolutely. I see Alex chiming in for me in the chat here. I'm considering political science. What can I do with that? I think you could do many of the careers that you're hearing from tonight, regardless of whether your official major is political science. I just emailed a student a big long list of potential careers in political science yesterday, actually, in response to this question. And I checked my email and tried to pull that into the chat for you, but the way it's formatted is not going to be very nice looking in a Zoom chat. So if you want that list, places where the political science department sent me that is a bit broader than what we're going to discuss tonight, just email me and I'll forward that information to you. So another question that I have for our panelists, you've both given already good information, here's how my interest changed, here's how I picked these things up along the way. And another thing I like to kind of talk about on this topic is who helped you with that, right? At Syracuse, it's often not just students kind of thinking about this alone in an echo chamber. They have a faculty advisor or multiple faculty members, an academic advisor, a career advisor who is helping them. And Alex, I think it would be interesting to hear about this from the graduate student perspective as well. How do you decide what are the best moves in your education? So do any panelists want to chime in about the support they got, mentorship they got, advising they received while they're in the Maxwell School?
Yeah, I can touch on it quickly. I guess for me, like definitely having a faculty advisor was one of the biggest things. They're really, all the teachers and professors at Syracuse are amazing. They're some of the best in the world. They're very well known. They're incredibly knowledgeable on both like professional career things and of course on the topics they teach. But yeah, everyone pretty much I talked to, faculty or from the academic advising, they're really good on keeping track of like making sure you're taking the right courses and just keeping on track to graduate on time and and I see a lot of comments about like double majoring in the chat and whatnot. And it's definitely doable. It's just you need to know how to time manage, I think, is one of the best things. And that's one of the most important things you learn in college, honestly, from my experience. But hope that was a sufficient answer.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I do tend to hear from our undergraduate students that when they just do one major, they sometimes feel a little bit underwhelmed. Again, it's really common for our students to do multiple majors or add on minors. Plus, you do a lot of work outside of class, research, internships, clubs and organizations, that kind of work. So if you just have the one major going on, that's really not typical, and you'll probably graduate early. And if that's what you want, that's great, right? But for a 4-year plan, one major with nothing else tacked on is pretty light. So yes, I think that's a great point. It's all about time management. It's about adding things to your plate until you are at a point where you're comfortable with your number of classes you're taking, with what you're doing in your free time, with the amount of free time you have left at the end of the day. And everyone is different, right? So we'll hear from our panelists tonight about what their experiences were, but you'll calibrate that to what's going to make sense for you as a college student. Anyone else want to chime in about mentorship or support at the university? And then I want to go in a little bit on Maxwell and DC and let Alex talk to the group about that.
I can quickly chat about this. I think career, how should you network? And my suggestion will be, you consider Maxwell. Start to talk to people who graduated from Maxwell already. Just send people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm interested in this. That's my interest. What was your experience? Which courses did you take? How did it help you? That's because I wish I knew this before. It would help me to kind of select courses better, a little bit towards my interests. So don't be shy. I think Maxwell Community is amazing, especially in Washington. So just approach them and you can email me and say, hey, I need your tips. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And it's not too early to start. Go on LinkedIn, find the Maxwell School on LinkedIn, click on people who have graduated there, whether you're interested in graduate school students who went to the Maxwell School, undergraduate students who went to a Maxwell School, and send them a message on LinkedIn. People love to talk about themselves. You'll find that out as you grow professionally. And, you know, it's an easy thing to do to ask someone, can you tell me about your experience? What would you have done in my shoes? People really like to receive those messages from prospective students. It's kind of fun and interesting to think back on your days as a student. So be sure to use LinkedIn as a resource for you, or reach out to me, right? And I'll find people that you can chat with. Absolutely. Alex, I saw your response to Maxwell and Washington, the question about Maxwell and Washington in the chat. Do you want to chime in with more info on that? We're going to talk about internships next. So I think this might be a good time to loop everyone in about Maxwell and Washington.
Yeah, sure. So I did my last semester, I think it's called, right, in Washington, D.C. It was the end of my program, so I didn't have a full-time experience. I took only one class because I already was working in the World Bank Group, so that was a prerequisite. But I think it's an excellent way, if you're interested in DC, government, politics, contractors or consulting, to put your foot in the door. And you're studying there at the same time. You have a vast network of Maxwell people who work in different institutions and private sector. And you just start to be super proactive, sending a lot of emails, sending a lot of LinkedIn requests, talking to people. And I think it's a great way to kind of start in DC your career.
Absolutely. So for those of you interested, I did put a link where you can read more on the programs in a little more time than we will tonight, but Maxwell in DC is great. I've been meeting with their staff this year just to learn a little bit more about, you know, their admissions process and what they offer to students. And I've been absolutely so impressed. I think it's one of the most impressive undergraduate opportunities that we offer students. You go to DC for a week or for a full semester, you live there, you do an internship there. If you're there for your semester program, if you're there for a week, you're doing site visits basically every day with different organizations to learn about, you know, what a day in their lives looks like. And I just think that's so incredibly valuable. It helps you get your foot in the door, helps you make some connections. And really importantly, like we want our students to be doing during all internships, is get a sense of what it's like to actually work in the field that you think you would like to work in. So Maxwell in DC is fantastic. It's, you know, when I asked the program also, you know, how competitive is it for students to do that? They said 100% of the time, if a student wants to do it, they can. They may have to apply more than once, right? They might not get in their first semester that they wanted to go, but if that's something you want to do, you know, they kind of guarantee, you know, you'll be able to join the program during one of your 4 years. So kind of a unique thing, cool thing about the Maxwell School. Does anyone else want to chime in about internships they took part in as undergraduate students? What was the experience like? How did you find that opportunity? What did you learn?
I can talk about some of the internships that I did throughout undergrad, although I don't know how helpful my perspective is, only because my first internship is what propelled me into my second summer and third summer, just through like who I worked for, knowing people, and then like referring me elsewhere. But my first summer I worked for a nonprofit, and then the following 2 summers I worked in the in my like Westchester County, New York Supreme Court for judges, 2 separate judges. But as far as like relating that back to Syracuse, I do think that advisors are really helpful. Although I didn't like directly use them to get those experiences, I think that they were helpful in providing, you know, options. And if you go and consult them, they can point you in different directions for what you may want to look for. And there are also opportunities to do internships during the school year. And I know people who have done that, and like their advisors help them navigate that process.
Actually, I have a really cool story about my internship. I had an internship at Atlanta, Georgia with former US President Jimmy Carter. And it was a really cool experience. I definitely encourage your students to apply there. I spent there 4 months because I was working in government before in elections, before I switched my career. So they work a lot in international development, human rights, elections. That was my interest at that moment. So yeah, kind of put in your resume, former president of the United States as your internship. Was really cool and helpful. Yeah, happy to share more about this too.
Yeah, and for me, During undergrad, I had two different internships. So one was at the Department of Commerce. I was working as an intern on like foreign and direct investment. So that's the trade flows between like the US and other countries. And I got that internship. I just was honestly looking on USA Jobs and I saw it come across. And what Syracuse helps, and they're really good about this, is like helping you tailor your resume to a specific internship or job, and then helping you craft a cover letter as well. I mean, I think that's really helpful. And the Maxwell program, it carries a lot of weight, the name recognition alone, and I'm sure all of you will do well. It definitely goes a long way.
I can give one more tip. If you're looking at an internship, Anil, great way to work for you. My advice, find Maxwell people who work in institution you're looking for, and just contact with people in DC and meet as much people as possible from that organization. I got my good network in the World Bank in DC. So they received so many applications, obviously, right? So finding the right people will help you. And Maxwell Community is super support people actually. And I think almost everybody will tell you, yeah, I already help.
Yeah, I like that we've kind of brought up the Maxwell Community a couple of times already. That sounds far-fetched, I think, sometimes to students to think like, oh yeah, people that graduated from here really hang together, or, you know, it really feels like a community, but it absolutely does. And you'll find that if you do the LinkedIn thing I mentioned, which is to send some graduates some messages and just see what kind of responses you get. People love that familiarity. People are really proud to attend Syracuse and graduate from Syracuse because of the name brand, especially the Maxwell brand. And they do want to hear about what your experiences are like and what you're thinking in terms of the programs. So I would really encourage you to take our panelists' advice and kind of use that community now, but then also, of course, while you're a student at Syracuse or at any university that you're attending, use those networking opportunities, because just the fact that you went to school at the same place, even if not at the same time, is a connection and can be a valuable connection. I saw a couple of questions in the chat, and thank you, panelists, for helping me out by going in. I mean, your answers are great. They are right along the lines of what I would be saying. So I was just kind of reading through those a little bit. For the student with a question about being undecided in freshman classes, you will have a specific undecided advisor who only works with undecided students. On our website, and I'll post the link, we did an hour-long panel, sorry, not a panel, an information session a few weeks ago, just about being undecided with one of those advisors, Nate Raybeck, who some of our panelists might recognize because he was definitely an advisor with us when you were at the university. Nate is one of those undecided advisors. He did a session with prospective students. So I'll post the link to that in the chat if you're interested. And then does anyone want to expand on the question about specific programs that the university offered that prepared you professionally? Any specific experiences, classes, programs, et cetera, that you want to touch base on a little bit more in depth than we can in the chat?
Oh, I just thought of one. So I don't know if the chancellor still does this course. I believe he does, but for anyone interested in really like any field, but it's been interesting in my first semester of law school, like this direct topic has come right back up, but the chancellor offers, I think like once a semester, or maybe it's once a year, a negotiations course that's like a weekend long course, and you can take it with law students. It's like a lottery, but they just send an email at some point and then you just like throw your name in the lottery and then like hope you get it. And so I was able to take that course and I found it really, really interesting. And then this semester, it's like a negotiations competition in law school. And I feel like I was like thinking back to that experience, taking that course, and I was like, wow, it kind of came full circle a little bit, but I thought that was really cool opportunity that Syracuse offers.
Yeah, there are quite a few kind of in-depth classes like that, either that do an abroad trip, that do a research project, that do an action plan. For example, some of you might be familiar with our citizenship and civic engagement program. That was the answer that popped into my head when I, saw this question. That major has to be paired with another program, and it teaches you to be an advocate, right? So if you're interested in women's rights, then maybe you would do women's and gender studies. If you're interested in conservation, environmental advocacy, clean energy, You might do geography or earth sciences as your undergraduate major and pair it with citizenship and civic engagement. And then they require you to do an internship and a research project and an action plan. So for example, I had a student do their process with me. They did an internship in admissions because they were interested in education policy. They then were kind of interested in the role of college students in college admissions, right? So how do our current students, for example, impact your decisions in the audience? And so they did a research project on that, the roles of our student volunteers, the dean's team, and then they did an action plan. How can we help students even more? How can we make our volunteers even more effective? So recommendations that our office got based on their internship followed by their research. And, you know, admissions might be kind of a boring example. I know all of you are in over your heads with college admissions right now, but you can imagine other examples where students were going into community organizations, government offices, et cetera, doing that series. So that's a cool major that kind of speaks to your point or your question about professional development. I see a question in the chat. Do any of our panelist members want to respond? Catherine asked, did you do more than one internship? And if so, did any particular internship either sway you from your intended major, or did it make you dive deeper into that topic? I think we've heard already of some examples of internships that went well that you decided you wanted to do it. Did anyone have an experience at an internship that pushed them away? Because I know that happens, and that's an equally valid and useful experience.
I wouldn't say I had, so my second internship besides the Department of Commerce, I worked at the Atlantic Council, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank. And I wouldn't say necessarily pushed me away from like studying international relations as a whole, but it kind of like, when applying to jobs, I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to like work for. So in that sense, it's kind of like trial and error. Like you see, like getting internships, like even if you don't like it, it's a great experience. Like you learn a lot, even if it's something you don't want to do. So I think that it's like, I think they're, in that sense, it's very beneficial.
Absolutely. So for students, internships are a way of testing the waters. The results of that test aren't what matter. It's that you put yourself in those shoes to see if you like it. If you are successful, you enjoy it, that's great, do more. If you don't like it, then good. Now we found that out before you're in a full-time job after graduation, right? So the point of internships is not necessarily always to build your resume. It's not always to solidify an interest. Sometimes it changes your interest, and that's perfectly fine. So that's why we really encourage our students to dive into multiple internship opportunities, as our panelists have been able to describe for you thus far. So next up, I want to talk about research, which is, in my mind, sometimes inseparable from internship. Sometimes you do research in an internship. Sometimes you get paid to do your research, so it feels like an internship. But research specifically is happening very often on campus, right? We have a lot of faculty and graduate students in the Maxwell School who welcome undergraduate students to help them with their projects. On this slide, Max on the far right is a Maxwell student studying geography and international relations. And you can see a quick snippet about his research on the slide. Do our panelists want to chat about research? Alex, I know this is something you've been able to describe briefly in the chat, but maybe you could start off by sharing a little bit more about your research experience, and then Anil or Amber, if you want to chime in as well.
Very briefly, I did some research in, because I was focused on international development as a foreigner. I knew that I'm moving to international development, World Bank, United Nations. So I was focused on this. And I did, one of my papers was about genocide in Rwanda and economic causes of this. And basically, when I had my first job in the World Bank, I asked, okay, are you familiar with land rights or something like this? I said, yeah, sure. I did kind of analysis in Maxwell, and that's basically helped me.
Anyone else want to chime in, or are we all set?
Okay, yeah, I can. For me, for IR, for international relations, they require you to do a capstone project before you graduate. So it's like a 25-page paper or so, and you have like a faculty advisor help you do it. And so mine was studying the economic impacts of foreign direct investment after the 2008 financial crisis in Spain and Italy, and comparing how the two countries reacted politically, economically, and who recovered better, essentially. So that's my undergrad research, on top of of course, all the other papers you're going to be doing for your courses.
Yeah, in some ways, research is going to be unavoidable. It's going to be a required part of your classes. But when we talk about undergraduate research, we're really focusing on those things that students do that are above and beyond. I see the conversation in the chat about, how soon is too soon? When should you start doing this kind of work? You see that our panelists have different opinions, and that totally mirrors what our students do. Some students get in the door in their very first couple weeks of class. They're already hounding our professors to get into a research lab, join a research group. They're already in the career office talking about applying for internships, and that's fine, right? We see other students who are not quite sure what they want to do yet. They feel like enough is on their plate, navigating that academically before they want to start applying to internships. And so they wait. In that case, students start getting more serious about this toward the end of their sophomore year. And either mode is fine. It depends on what you're prepared for. To an extent, it will also depend on the level of experience you've had as a high school student. Are you going to be competitive for a research team? Are you going to be competitive for an internship? I don't know. That depends on what you've done, and every student is different. So some students need the time at Syracuse as well, just to get some coursework and experience and sometimes maturity, under their belt as college students. So everyone is different. And I think this is a good example where, our panelists differ on this, and that's something that our students do as well. All right, so Amber has been warned that I was going to ask her about pre-law advising at Syracuse. I'm sure some of you are thinking about law school. If you're interested in hearing even more about law school, we did a pre-law panel conversation, admissions related on law school, like the undecided session I mentioned, and I'll post that link in the chat. We will also be doing another Maxwell panel tomorrow, where we'll have another pre-law student. I think as many opinions as you can get are valuable as you're thinking about law school, especially this early. So Amber, do you want to tell us, all the dirty details about how competitive it was for you, how you navigated the complicated application process? Obviously you were successful, you came out on top, which is awesome. So we'd love to hear how your experience was with this.
Yeah, okay, so I kind of touched on it earlier, but I went into college kind of thinking that I wanted to go to law school. I don't think I was like 100% certain, but it was definitely kind of my plan the whole time. And with that being the case, I think a lot of the things that I did in undergrad in some way or another, maybe were like with the subconscious thought of like, okay, maybe this would be good. Skill-wise or experience-wise, to prepare me for law school in some capacity. So I don't know. Okay, I'll start from Syracuse. As an undergrad, because I'm looking at the screen here and I see like campus organizations and things of that nature, I joined a professional fraternity. I did not join the one that was specifically for pre-law, which is what's here, Phi Alpha Delta, but the professional fraternity that I joined was more holistic, in the sense that like it wasn't a pre-law one, it was like professional business. And so I felt like that really helped me to develop a lot of soft skills. And of course, when you join organizations like that, you get access to the alumni network of the organizations. And so I was able to talk to a lot of people who had gone through the law school application process before me. Okay, now moving into like, figuring out how to apply and all that. So Syracuse offers, like you see here, they offer free LSAT prep materials. There are emails that go around where they do kind of like free courses here and there, not like full length, but like you can sit for like one free LSAT class. And I took advantage of that when I was on campus. I actually took a gap year. So after I graduated, I spent the entire summer following, studying for the LSAT, which was tough. And I would definitely advise any of you who are considering it. Obviously, it's definitely way in the future for you now, but when you plan to take the test, I would just like advise you to make sure that you're budgeting out the time to do it, because it's not a test that you can study for overnight. So I would just say utilize as much of the free material that Syracuse provides, because also preparing for the LSAT can be really expensive. And then, after taking the test, of course, you have to prepare an application. I got one of my recommendation letters written by a professor that I had. So another piece of advice, get to know your professors, because they can definitely be really beneficial to you later on. And then as far as applying, I mean, I like sourced from a lot of the things that I did at Syracuse, as far as like, some law schools will want to interview you after your application. And I really spoke to a lot of the things that I accomplished while at Syracuse in that interview. I only did one, but like in the interview that I did have, I spoke to a lot of the things that Syracuse gave me and the things that I did at Syracuse. And so I definitely just encourage you on a whole to get involved on campus, just join like not as many things, but join things that mean something to you, and try to take on like a meaningful role in those things. And just like really pay attention to all of the things that Syracuse forwards you. PreLaw is not a major at Syracuse, but it's like a track, I guess. And so there's like a PreLaw email listserv that like they send a bunch of PreLaw emails, and I would just advise you like just keep looking at those as they come in, because you'll notice if you do, I don't know, are you all committed to Syracuse or if you're like applying, but Syracuse, you'll get a lot of emails just in general through your inbox with a lot of things, but I would say like pay extra attention to the PreLaw ones that come in if you know that you are considering law school, because there are a lot of really cool things that Syracuse offers, and opportunities with the law school as well to go inside or tour or see things. And so I definitely say that Syracuse offers a lot, even for someone like me who took a gap year. Like I still was able to source from a lot that I did at Syracuse in like getting myself here. So.
Well, that was a much better overview than I would have given. Much more in depth, probably much more interesting to the students, certainly more interesting than my bullets on the slide. So thank you, Amber, very helpful. I would echo everything that Amber said. There will be a lot of information available to you at Syracuse. There will be a lot of educational opportunities, and there will be a lot of coaching and support if you want that coaching and support for how to channel that into an application, including mock interviews and looking at your GPA and having conversations about, am I competitive for this school or that school? I like that Amber also mentioned the financial planning piece. That's something that I know might be on your minds already, or maybe you've had family conversations about this. College is expensive, right? Law school is also expensive. So our advisors are also able to talk to you about that financial planning piece, right? How do I remain a student for a few more years? It's not free. So it's useful for you to talk to them about scholarships for law schools, grants that you can get, how to financially plan for that. So that's a big piece of the puzzle, and something that I'm glad Amber mentioned, because I don't think we talk about that enough. Okay, so at this point, we've covered the topics that I'm going to force upon us. I would like to cover more topics that students want to hear about now that I think we've kind of gotten to know each other and had an overview. So students, I will encourage you to start sharing your questions in the chat now. The first question that we should start with, this is from last night's session and it went really well, was just to kind of start with a bit of conversation about a day in the life for all of our panelists. What is a normal day like as a data scientist, right? Working in the Department of State, being a law student. Like these are things that I think are easy to assume what our panelists do, and we're not always right. I think in fact, we're usually not. So it would be good if we could all share a little bit about just a typical day, what it looks like for you, what the career really is behind the curtain, if you will. So maybe Anil, you could start and kind of share about your life right now. We'll have all our panelists do that, and then we will go to the chat and see what questions you all have for us.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a grad student at Johns Hopkins now. I'm in my second year out of 2. So I still have classes. 1 out of 4 of them is online. So essentially, when I'm in class, I'm full-time in my position at the State Department. I'm working in the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, working on arms transfers with the US government and other governments around the world. So I go in every now and then for meetings, but for the most part, I work from home. So I wake up like 8:30 or so, hop on, check emails. Then I have time to get lunch after some meetings and getting some work done. And then I usually have class in like early afternoon, so I can get out. I usually have class at like 2 p.m. So I have class. I'm not working during class, of course. And then after that, get back on State Department email and work a little more. So my days are definitely longer, and I'm sure Alex and Amber have pretty long days as well. It looks like for Alex, especially right now. But yeah, so I'm usually wrapping up my day about 7 or so. You got to make sure to eat between then. But Yeah, I mean, it's not too different from what you guys will go through or are going through in college. It's just definitely trying to time manage as best you can. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that we're all sitting here right now very clearly out of work hours kind of shows, yeah, what life after college might be like. I think especially for students in the Maxwell School who get these kind of high-powered jobs or again go into higher education. Alex, since we mentioned it, you're sitting in the office. What's your day been like?
I mean, I just joined the company. I moved from United States after Chicago to London. I'm 3 months here. Consulting is pretty challenging. It's private sector consulting, data science. So I'm putting about 60 hours per week at least in my job. And maybe it's not for everyone. So it's like midnight in London office. Yeah, but I love it. That's why I'm doing this. I think Maxwell prepares. I mean, I spent much long hours in Maxwell, frankly speaking. But I took as much as I could. I took about 70 credits in 2 years. So you can take a lot from the program and from Maxwell if you know what to take. And that's why you need to ask people who were in Maxwell. Yeah, daily work, like a lot of data science, programming, talking to clients, and a lot of research. And Maxwell prepares for research too very well. That's about me.
Last but not least, Amber, how's law school?
Okay, that's the golden question. I will be honest because I think, what else can I do? Okay, so your first year of law school is extremely busy. They just kind of throw you off the deep end a little bit, but like everyone warns you, and I think that like there is support for you and it's fine. It is fine and you will get through it, but I think a lot of things that people maybe don't tell you because you think it's going to be like Legally Blonde or something and you're just going to come in and it's going to be great, but like you spend a lot of time outside of class reading. So I'm taking 4 classes, but let's say for like I don't know, I have 2 classes a day every day of the week. But so most days I'm done by 4 p.m., just like depending on what classes I'm having. But then outside of class, I'm reading in like every waking moment that is like free to me. And that's just the reality of like my first year. I've heard that your second and third year, it's not as grueling, but the first year is a bit challenging. So my days are definitely very long. I start class at 8:30 in the morning every day, and I'm done reading and doing what I need to do. Like it depends, maybe midnight or whatever, but it all comes to an end at some point. And so they say the first year is the hardest one. And so that's just what I'm like toughing through right now, but it's still good. And like, of course, I'm excited to be here. It's just, yeah, a little bit taxing at the moment.
These are the answers that I like, the honest answers, right? So students, I think that's useful for you. I think if you want to hear more stuff like this, again, we're doing another panel tomorrow and you can reach out on LinkedIn to alumni. So be sure to be asking these questions so you can kind of think about what it really is like to do the kinds of careers that you're thinking of. I see some activity in the chat about coming to Syracuse from out of state. And I think Alex kind of laughed because he has by far traveled the furthest to get to Syracuse. Does anyone want to chime in on this? You know, what was it like arriving in Syracuse, getting used to it there? Doesn't have to be academic, you know, the process of moving and going to college somewhere or going to grad school somewhere far from where you're living.
Yeah, I came from Northern Virginia. So it's like a 6-hour drive more or less to Syracuse, just straight north essentially. So my freshman year, yeah, I mean, it's definitely an adjustment. I mean, you're leaving your house, your parents' house, or wherever else you live, and but I mean, it's very exciting. It's Syracuse does a really good job of like you get to know and mesh with all the people on your floor right away. They have a lot of group activities. And if you get involved early on, like Amber has touched on before, like whether it's Greek life or different clubs or anything, you meet a lot of people, whether it's similar interests or not similar interests. So I joined community service fraternity Alpha Phi Omega my first year, and I loved it. It was so much fun. You do community service, but you also have some social events too, and it's really fun. And I was in a couple other different clubs, but yeah, I think Syracuse was a really good job, honestly. I made friends right away. So if you're worried about that, do not be. Everyone's in the same boat as you when you go in. So it was honestly, I haven't even thought about that question at all, even when I was going to Syracuse, because I wouldn't be concerned about it at all. And I know one of my good friends came from Washington State, and Alex, of course, even further. So, and everyone seems to be doing fine with it.
So I will give a quick plug for learning communities. To those of you who are coming into Syracuse from out of state, you're going to be required to live on campus. First year, you will have to be in the dorms. Second year, you can choose to be in a campus apartment or in the dorms. Third and fourth year, you will be done with that. You'll be ready to get off campus. But for that first year, when you're in the dorms, it can be useful to join a learning community if you're concerned about making connections with the students around you. This is a totally individual thing. Some of our panelists might disagree with me. Learning communities can be a really good way to kind of get affiliated with a community, right? It might be the LGBTQ+ community. There is a Maxwell community. There is an outdoor adventure community, right? When you're gonna lug your kayak out to one of the state parks and you wanna live on the same floor with people that can do that with you. So I've heard differing opinions on this. Some people like that, they wanna be in a community. Other people say, I wanna see how different people are from me, right? I wanna just throw my hat in and see what happens. So if that's you, that's great. You don't need to do this. By not selecting a learning community, you'll be in a mixed floor with other freshman students from different colleges, different majors, different states, different countries. But if you want to have kind of a more homogeneous experience in the dorms, that would be helpful to you, then learning communities are an option. So I left a link to that in the chat. I always laugh about that because I used to talk about learning communities in sessions like this, and a student who was interning with me at a time would come into every session. She would say, no, don't do it. You know, I loved my random floor. I loved seeing all these other people that I had nothing in common with. She went to boarding school in high school, right? So she was ready to dive right in. So that is another thing, you know, depends on the person, but it's an option. Amber, do you want to talk about study abroad? I saw your comment about Madrid, and now I think probably a lot of students in the audience are itching to hear more.
Oh yeah, for sure. And before I start on that, I also do want to say I was an RA on campus. So if anyone has like questions about dorms and all that type of stuff, like I'm also happy to answer those because I feel like I got very familiar with that situation. And then yeah, so study abroad. I spent my spring semester junior year studying abroad in Madrid, Spain, and I had the best time. I saw like part of the question was like, was it distracting from academics? And to be honest with you, I don't think at all, because you'll hear, I feel like if you get on campus, you'll hear a lot of students say like, oh, like classes are a joke or whatever when you go abroad. And so I kind of went abroad thinking that was going to be the case as well, to be quite honest. And I got there and that just like wasn't the case. Like classes are definitely not a joke. Like they're real and good and like substantive. And so you can like work with your advisor, your academic advisor, to look at the classes that are being offered. Of course, because like it's a smaller school center situation, you're not going to have like the breadth of courses that you would have on Syracuse's campus itself, but they have courses that will satisfy like, I feel like most majors requirements. Political science, there were a lot of courses to take, and I actually like finished my political science major when I was abroad. So that worked out well, but I think it's a really great opportunity to step outside of your comfort zone. I happened to study abroad like without any of my like closest friends from campus because none of them wanted to go the semester I was going. And I like did it anyway, and I made new friends and had a really awesome time. And students from other schools will go on Syracuse's program as well because they have like a really good abroad program and it's like known beyond Syracuse. And so it's a nice way to meet other students from other schools too. And I made friends who go to other schools who like I've kept in touch with from our study abroad. So I just think like overall, I could not encourage it more. I'm so glad I did it to this day. So yeah.
So I saw that Alex mentioned the Geneva program for graduate students. For those of you who would want to do something like that, it is interesting to a lot of Maxwell students, and there are graduate student options and undergraduate student options. So I posted a link to that in the chat. Alex, did you want to chime in on that anymore, or does anyone else want to chime in general on study abroad?
I didn't study abroad. I mean, I'm a foreigner. but I know multiple people who studied abroad. So for me, US experience more interesting for me at that moment. I know multiple US students did internships in Geneva. It was really interesting. Geneva is expensive. You should be prepared for this as a city. But people landed a really cool job in headquarters of United Nations in New York. Or people find other jobs. Somebody, I think, worked for Department of State and the embassy in Russia. So it's a really interesting program. It's a unique experience. Everything which I wrote in chat is different from your American Center of Perspective. Will help you in a school such as Maxwell to solve global issues.
All right, students, it looks like we have about 10 more minutes for questions. I can ask our panel questions, right? I'm full of questions, but I think it's more important that we answer your questions. So if you have questions for the panel that you would still like us to answer, or if there's something you said in the chat earlier and in the frenzy of responses, we missed it, then now is a good time to let us know. I see a question in the chat about financial aid. Does anyone on the panel want to talk about financial aid? Otherwise, I think the better course is to talk to me about what you can expect based on your financial decision and see if I can find a student who's in similar shoes with you. But panelists, if you want to talk about this, you're welcome to.
I mean, Syracuse does offer financial aid and they offer it in like different forms. But like Rachel said, like it's going to be different for every single person, but there are just like different avenues for which you can like get aid, whether that's like a merit scholarship or grants or through like loans, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be different for everyone, but they offer it.
What about like Syracuse grants and scholarships, like things that you can apply for as a student? Did anyone get money based on their research experience, support for an internship, things like that? That's more of an even playing field.
I personally didn't apply for any, but I know that there are several different kind of scholarship things that go on at Syracuse, and they like forward those opportunities a lot. There are like tons of things you can apply for after getting to Syracuse. Also, there's like work study jobs. That's like a form of financial aid, so called work study, where like you can get a job on campus. But there are a bunch of things like the Our Time Has Come scholarship, I believe, offers money and all types of things. So like there are plenty of ways to find money in different areas. But yeah, it's really just like person specific, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely is. Students, there's an office on campus called The Source, which helps students apply for scholarships while they are Syracuse students. So really the conversation about money doesn't end after you apply to college. There are lots of resources you can use, getting your study abroad paid for, getting paid for your research experiences, I mentioned already, getting a student job, doing research, and then competing for scholarship money based on the quality or the extent of the research you've done. So there's a lot you can do to apply for those types of scholarships as Syracuse students. I dropped the link to The Source in the chat. There is a very big conversation to be had about paying for college, about the mess you can get yourself into if you take on too much college debt, about how to best get scholarship funds and financial aid. That is an hour-long plus conversation that we can't have in the next 6 minutes. And again, it's one that I'd like to have with you one-on-one so we can talk about your financial situation, not in front of a group, and what the best course of action will be for you as you're applying. So that's a conversation I'd like to have with anyone who's interested offline individually. Okay, so I see a question. How have you translated the coursework and skills that you acquired as a Maxwell student into real world internships and career opportunities? I see Anil has mentioned a little bit about this. Do you want to expand on Mike?
Yeah, I could. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like an IR degree or poli-sci degree. When you get on, so my first job for a defense company, it's like the IR degree and poli-sci degree kind of gives you like a general understanding, and then like of course you take specialized classes in some specific areas, but for me, just having that foundation of like in a general understanding of how things work in government and whatever else more specifically you're doing, like defense or foreign policy or whatnot. I mean, in any job there's going to be on-job learning, so you can't worry about that, but being prepared with Maxwell is what I was getting at. Just having that foundation and building on that made it pretty seamless. After the first month or two, you learn quickly on any job, but just knowing a thing or two goes a long way. And just, again, that general understanding of, more specifically for my field, for the IR degree, just helped a lot. It helped a lot.
All right, good advice. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. That will be, are there any programs or groups you joined during your freshman year that helped you adapt to college life? So if you can all go back in time and think about freshman year specifically, does anyone want to chime in on that? Things that helped you get accustomed to the college drill?
I can like speak to it a little bit. By the end of my college career, I was like pretty heavily involved on campus. But my freshman year, I don't think I took advantage of the opportunities as much, just because like I think I was maybe a little bit more introverted or something. But I will say, like, when you get to school, especially in those first few weeks, like, say yes to as much as you can. It's going to feel kind of annoying, but like when your RA calls the floor meeting, like, go to it, like, because I think the best way to start to build community and like find your place is to just like meet people. And Syracuse has so many students that like you can't expect that like in the first second you're gonna like find your best friends forever. You might, and honestly, like the people that I made friends with within the first like 2 weeks of school are actually like still my closest friends from Syracuse now. So it happens, and like I just told you, like some of my closest friends, I met them like really, really early on. But I'd say like just look out for the club fair and join something that like piques your interest, and it can be like your home away from home. I have friends who like are dancers and joined like Outlaws dance troupe their freshman year, and by senior year, like they were, you know, co-chair of the team, and like it was the best thing for them. So definitely just like join something. I will say, like, I think those organizations for me came around my sophomore year, but they could have come around my freshman year if I had joined them then. But I just like would highly, highly encourage you all to try to get involved.
Yeah, Amber's right. You don't have those experiences unless you put yourself out there a little bit, even if it's scary. And Anil mentioned earlier, you know, everyone's in the same shoes. It's not just you feeling that way. Everyone else is thrown into the same bag, and everyone else is kind of going through the same thing. So if anything, like putting yourself out there is going to help you and maybe someone else. They want that interaction as well. So if you don't ask, you don't receive. If you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to make those connections as easily. So it is important to use all the things that Syracuse is going to push in your face, learning communities and the hall meetings like Amber mentioned, and clubs and organizations and internships and all of that stuff. Taking advantage of those things will truly help you. You know, when I was in college, my now best friend I met at work. My husband I met in a research lab when I was in college. So, you know, if you don't do those things, you don't make those connections, and they change your life. So important advice to keep in mind. Lastly, I'm going to encourage you to connect with our current students as well. We had some questions about life in the dorms. We had questions about what do you do outside of class. We had questions about how do you manage your time. Those are all equally good questions for current students. And we have a team of over 100 current students who contribute to this Instagram account, SU Dean's team. And the whole point of the account is to share with you that kind of information. So you can scan the QR code on the screen to find the SU Dean's team account or search for them. And they post, you know, about internships and what they do off campus and what their classes are like. And a few weeks ago, they all were sending in screenshots of their class schedules, which I thought was really cool for high school students to see. You don't always know what that looks like. So Instagram is useful to you as current students. All right, so with that, I just want to close by thanking our panelists. I appreciate the three of you being here. We've discussed now how busy you are, which I knew, but hopefully our students now also appreciate, you know, how crazy your schedules are, and, you know, understand that this is a busy time for all of us. So we really appreciate you three being here to help us and share with your experiences. I know it's cool for me to learn, but I'm sure our students even more so appreciated that and learned a lot today. So thank you again to our panelists for being here. We appreciate your time. Students, same thing. You're busy, we know. You're zoomed out, we know. We appreciate you being here and spending some time with us. And if you have questions for me, please do reach out to me and I will talk to you then. Thanks, everyone.